Okay, so my Starmer video went up this morning. I said Labour had handed Reform a gift. The ink was barely dry before Nigel Farage jumped in front of a camera to prove it.
On May the 7th, in the Midlands, Yorkshire, all the north of England, Reform scored absolutely stunning victories in areas that Labour had dominated for the best part of 100 years. The sheer scale of our victory against Labour made it inevitable that this Prime Minister could not survive. And because of that, Burnham steps forward and wins quite convincingly the Makerfield by-election.
Now, he's not wrong about the local elections. Reform did have a stunning night, you can't deny that. And yes, Labour did lose ground it had held for generations, and the Parliamentary Party looked at those results, panicked, and then pushed Starmer out. What Farage didn't mention, though, is his own role in what happened next. Let's take his Italy comparison. He stood there and he said with a completely straight face that Britain is becoming ungovernable, cycling through prime ministers like Italy used to. 6 prime ministers in 7 years, he said, which would be remarkable, except that it's 5, I think. Johnson, Truss, Sunak, Starmer, and now Burnham? 5? Anyway, the man who spent 30 years making British politics as chaotic as possible would like you to know he's very concerned about instability.
Unbelievably, we're about to have our 6th Prime Minister in 7 years. I remember growing up thinking Italy was totally ungovernable as they went through a new Prime Minister every year, and yet that's where we are here.
I mean, that is him. He's the arsonist complaining about the fire, isn't he? I mean, Reform swept Labour's northern heartlands, and Labour panicked. Labour knifed their leader, and that chain of events runs directly through Nigel Farage's front door, and he's standing in the wreckage demanding answers. The logic of his own argument is that he caused this. He won't say that, but it's there. Then there's the Makerfield by-election. Burnham won it, Labour on 54% of the vote, Reform second on 34%. Farage makes much of the irony that Burnham ran on the vote Burnham, get Starmer out, the same energy that Reform's local election message. He's not entirely wrong, but what he glosses over is that Labour still won by 20 points. If that's Reform's greatest triumph, well, it's a fairly modest one.
Ironically, with the same message that we had in the local elections. Ours was vote Reform, get Starmer out. His was vote Burnham, get Starmer out.
And now the debt. This now is quite interesting because Farage throws out a statistic that is technically accurate and completely misleading at the same time. He says that Britain's debt is rising faster than any country in the world apart from Botswana. And if you check the IMF figures, that's true. The UK's debt to GDP ratio has climbed from about 30% to over 95% since 2001, second fastest in the world. It's only beaten by Botswana, whose diamond industry collapsed.
In a country whose debt is rising faster than any country in the world, apart from Botswana.
Here's what Farage doesn't tell you, though. That debt, it covers about 25 years. The Conservatives were in government for 14 of them. The financial crisis happened on their watch. Austerity happened on their watch. The COVID spending happened on their watch. The Truss mini-budget, which torched the gilt markets in a single afternoon, happened on their watch. Farage presents a quarter of a century of debt accumulation through as if it's Labour's problem. It's a British political problem, one that his former allies spent most of those years making worse. Then comes the Brexit section, and this is where Farage's entire worldview comes into focus.
10 years ago, on the 23rd of June 2016, we voted Brexit. Much of our political establishment has never accepted the result. And even those that reluctantly did, namely the Conservative Party, refused to implement what voters demanded, namely lower levels of immigration and more freedom for our sole traders and small businesses. They were just 2 of the benefits we could have taken having got back self-governance.
10 years on, everything still traces back to Brexit. Northern Labour voters abandoned their party because of Brexit. The establishment never accepted it, and the Conservatives failed to implement it properly. Labour drifting back towards Europe. It's all Brexit, which is a convenient way of saying whatever is wrong is somebody else's fault. Reform cannot be responsible for any outcome ever, because the original betrayal was in 2016, and everything since is downstream of that. It's an unfallaciable argument. Nothing Reform does or says can be held against them because they're the only ones who's ever truly believed. And now, the general election demand.
I demand, we at Reform demand, a general election. After all, when the Conservatives were chopping and changing prime ministers, Labour kept saying there should be a general election. Let's have a general election. Let's get a government with a clear democratic mandate.
I actually agree with him on this. I said the same thing earlier in my video this morning. If Burnham walks into Downing Street via a party coronation with no public vote, no mandate, then Reform will spend 4 years pointing out at a Prime Minister that didn't have his own mandate from the people. And on that very specific narrow point, Farage does actually have a case. But notice what he's doing. He's calling for a general election because he believes Reform would win it, or at least make an enormous gain. This isn't constitutional principle, it's an electoral strategy dressed up as a democratic concern. The same man who spent years undermining faith in British institutions is now their passionate defender, right at the moment when an election would suit him. You can't call that principle, it's just political timing. And here's the thing that should worry anyone watching this Reform rise with clear eyes. They've had a brilliant few weeks, stunning local election results, Starmer's gone, Burnham's incoming on a contested mandate. Every instinct in the media is pointing at a Reform surge. But Reform have never actually had to govern anything properly. Yes, they've got councils and you can look at them and see how badly they're doing those. But for all intents and purposes, they are still entirely a protest party. The most effective protest movement in British politics in a generation, but a protest nonetheless. Farage wants a general election. He might even get one. And the moment he does, the questions he's been able to dodge for 30 years, or at least the last few months, will finally need some answers. And that's probably when it's going to get more interesting.